This is Thomas Mills with Politics NC, and I want to welcome you to the latest edition of Restless Natives NC with our regular guest, Anderson Clayton, chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, who is on the road and riding through rural North Carolina, and Travis Fain, our political analyst extraordinaire. So, let's go ahead and jump in it, folks. Man, has it been a big couple of weeks here. You know, they're tearing down the White House. They're burning down the congressional districts. We got to get into this and figure out what's going on. And I think the place to start, since we're Politics North Carolina, is the congressional districts that Republicans are stealing right now. This week, after quickly dropping these districts, they passed them without a whole lot of debate or discussion. Travis, you want to tell us a little bit about what happened with the districts?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's to pick up one Republican district at the expense of Don Davis, Democrat in Eastern North Carolina. And I mean, it's always the moderates that get the shaft, right? You know, the people who seem willing to work across the aisle. I think that's a fair description of former state Senator Davis, now U.S. Representative Don Davis. And so we will not have a single really competitive congressional district in North Carolina. Every one of them you'll be able to look at and pretty much know, okay, a Republican's going to win that one, a Democrat's going to win that one, and of course the Republicans will win most. So what is it going to be, 11-3 now, Republicans to Democrats? Is that the thinking?
That's the thinking.
And it's, it's a shame on a number of levels, but from where I kind of sit, which is fairly close to the middle, politically speaking, I think it's a shame because it just further entrenches fringe politics, right? Like if you do not have to really win a general election because the general election is not in doubt, you just have to focus on the primary, well, then that really favors people who are on the left or the right fringes. Although I do think we've got some good members of Congress. That doesn't necessarily apply to all of them. But dang, y'all, like, can't we have some competitive elections? Can't we have some elections that lead to people going to Congress who have an incentive to work across the aisle and solve some of the really big ass problems that we have in this country, like a $38 trillion national debt? At some point, we got to do something about Social Security. We're not going to do that. Just Republicans do it or just Democrats do it. Like most of the really big problems that we have in this country that we need to address, that we need leaders to address, have to be addressed across the aisle. And we've got states scrambling to draw maps so that they can snatch up congressional districts and have control of the U.S. House of Representatives, and bipartisanship be damned.
Right.
Well,
and,
isn't it already
this whole thing got
bipartisanship
kicked
be
off
damned?
when Texas decided that they were gonna redistrict to give Republicans an advantage going into the 2026 elections. California responded with a referendum that would give them the ability to redistrict in the middle of the decade. A handful of other states are doing it, and Donald Trump basically came in and squeezed the North Carolina legislature and said, we want this. Now, there's some evidence that Phil Berger cut a deal with him that he would redistrict the state if Donald Trump would give him his endorsement in the primary. And I think Trump did endorse Berger this week, did he not?
I haven't seen that he actually endorsed him. That certainly wouldn't surprise me. I mean, if there was a story not too long ago basically saying, hey, Phil Berger reached out to Donald Trump to try to get his endorsement. He, of course, Berger, Senate President Pro Tem, most powerful politician in the state, and faces a serious primary challenge from Sam Page up in Rockingham County. And Berger said, no, I haven't reached out to the president asking for his endorsement. Okay, why not? That seems like political malpractice if you didn't do that. Why wouldn't you do that? He says he did not. Maybe he means I, Phil Berger, and only I'm speaking about only me and not any of the cadre of people around me didn't reach out. Maybe that's what that means. I don't know. He does not share his thinking with me typically. But yeah, obviously this is Donald Trump pulling the strings. And I heard a number of Republican lawmakers here in North Carolina try to point the finger at Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. As you mentioned, California is doing a redistricting to try to increase Democratic members of the House of Representatives from California. But as you also noted, that was after Texas started it. So if you're like, who started this? Well, it's Texas. It's Republicans in Texas, to the extent that I'm that interested in who started it. We all know two wrongs don't make a right. And I'm tired of hearing politicians basically argue that two wrongs make a right. We're treating this just as a zero-sum game that we all have to win, and the other side has to lose. Why can't we work together just a little bit? I mean, we're all Americans here, but it has been disappointing the way Republicans. I was watching a speech that Representative Brendan Jones, the Republican majority leader in the North Carolina House, gave, and then sent out on Twitter, basically saying, we're not going to let Gavin Newsom determine control of the U.S. Congress. I'll give you a quote. Republican-led states are here to make sure that one man does not predetermine the controls of Congress. We will not let outsiders tell us how to govern. Yes, you will, as long as that outsider's name is Donald Trump, because you're just making the exact same argument and pointing your finger at Gavin Newsom when you're doing what President Trump has asked you to do. And I'll go a step further. Republicans in North Carolina, Speaker of the House Destin Hall was specific when it came to the ongoing Senate race that we've got. He said, who should the Republican candidate for the United States Senate and from North Carolina be in 2026? And he said, whoever Donald Trump picks, whoever President Donald Trump picks. So spare me the we don't let one man decide things in North Carolina argument. You clearly do.
Well, the redistricting thing is really disturbing because it really has essentially ended democracy in North Carolina in congressional races. There's no.
I'm not getting on board with that, but continue.
Well, it's pretty much, if the winner's predetermined, then there's not a democracy. And it's the same way with the state house and the state senate here. And look, we've always had some level of gerrymandering. It's just never been this extreme, and partly because we never had the technology to make it like this. And, Republicans, it's not just in North Carolina, and, it's other states too. And you're right. They're letting Donald Trump call the shots. Anderson, welcome back. Anderson disappeared for a little bit because, as we said, she's moving across the world right now, and she disappeared. Anderson, your thoughts on that new congressional district?
That is racist. That's probably my quickest one. And Travis, it cut off right as Travis was talking about bipartisanship ending on my end. And I was like, well, hasn't bipartisanship already ended when you got Republicans that are willing to your point, take politics and make it as extreme as possible on both ends of the spectrum to be able to have folks like that are the only ones that can win elections throughout North Carolina? I kind of think bipartisanship ended a long time ago in politics in so many ways. And that's unfortunate, right? I think that having fair representation and free elections in North Carolina would be a big part of that. But I think that what we saw Republicans do this week is exactly what I've expected them to do. But it was the lowest of the low thing that we've ever seen in North Carolina. I mean, actually, probably not, though, because of the Supreme Court doing this to us back in 2023 as well. We've been through redistricting so much in the state that it's like this is just another blow.
You got to be careful saying
but I
something
do
is
think
the lowest of the low. But I think
the act
Democrats can
itself,
very
to me,
rightly be upset
is one of
about
them.
this, and I think the average voter should be upset about it too, because it just changes. It just continues this shift to where the primary is the most important thing as opposed to the general election, and the general election should be the most important thing.
That's right.
And Anderson, you were cutting out there. I wouldn't have spoken over you otherwise.
No, take it away, Travis Payne. Do it to it, truly. I'm sorry about my service, though, to folks listening to this.
Well, it is a shame. I mean, when you have a state that basically votes 50-50 Democrat, Republican, and you end up with 11-3 split in congressional districts, there's something wrong. And it's not how anybody envisioned us choosing our representatives. It's real kind of bastardization of representative democracy, and that's a real shame. Anderson, you got any other thoughts?
No, if the only thing you hear from me on this is that it's racist, it's that.
Well, and I'll expound on that a little bit. You know, obviously Congressman Davis is black, and he's not going to be in Congress anymore. They have targeted him for removal. I don't think anyone disputes that. The race issue is really important for a number of reasons, one of which is it's really the only avenue left for a lawsuit to try to undo this, because the United States Supreme Court and the state Supreme Court have said gerrymandering for the sake of a political party for partisan gain, that's fine. You can do that. But what you can't do is gerrymander on a racist basis, you know, to shrink the voting power of one group over another. So it'll be interesting to see if that argument flies, you know, how well it goes. And I mean, and with what the U.S. Supreme Court is potentially doing with the Voting Rights Act, that might not even be illegal in the near future. I'm not as well versed on that. So I don't want to get over my skis.
Well, you know, another thing that happened was Donald Trump bulldozed the East Wing of the White House, and a lot of people didn't see it coming. Now, I've seen people on social media saying, "Oh, he's been saying he was going to do this for a long time." Well, I pay a lot of attention to news, and I didn't expect it to be basically ripped down and torn away, particularly after Donald Trump said explicitly that it would not be torn down and ripped away. So I'm curious what you guys think about this. Anderson, while we got you?
I don't know that you're going to like my opinion on it, Thomas Mills.
Okay.
I actually think that Democrats are overblown. I'm going to be honest with you. Who cares? And I get that and I think a lot of my party does, to be truthful, a lot of Democrats are the only ones that I really talk to that are outraged over this, to be truthful. And I'm like, I don't think that most of America has visited the White House yet, nor let alone knows what it looks like. They do know the fact that their pocketbooks are still hurting, and that our party right now cares more about the fact that a building is being torn down, it seems to, right, than we do about people losing health care. And I think if that's going to be our main mission and focus point and thing that we have got that we're talking about more and more, it also has to be the focal point of us nationally. And did I love the destruction of it? No, but it didn't do to me what it's done to everybody else, which is not to say it's not going to have that reaction to every other average voter across the country. I feel like Democrats are making a much bigger deal out of this. But Thomas, you had a great point when you had asked me about this originally, I think, of the way in which Donald Trump has done this. I think people, if we frame it correctly, right, people are going to see that he is spending more money on a luxury ballroom than he is on your health insurance. But I just see more people up in arms about the fact that he is destroying this building versus everything else going on in the world right now that I find to be abhorrent, to be truthful.
What do you think, Travis?
First of all, good job, Anderson, kind of keeping the main thing there. A trap that Democrats fall into a lot is there are so many things to be upset about when it comes to Donald Trump. And if you fall for the latest outrage, you know, you do take your eye off some other things. I don't have huge personal opinions on it. I agree with you, Thomas, that it's not that he tore it down. It's that he said, this is just going to be nearby, you know, they're not going to tear it down. And then they tore it down, you know, so it's another lie, or at least it seems very much like a lie, because there are multiple parts to the White House complex. And well, was he talking about this versus that? But he clearly misled everybody. One thing I don't know that I've seen really, except in some of the coverage. So the current White House, and I think this is just the main building as opposed to the East Wing or the West Wing. I think that's what it's talking about, but the coverage is not clear, is 55,000 square feet, 55,000 square feet for the current White House. This ballroom is going to be 90,000 square feet. And so the kind of historic preservation or Capitol Society, I don't know what the name of the group was, but like the history people and the architects in the Washington, D.C. area who deal with government monuments sent a letter to the president saying, hey, we're concerned this thing you're going to build is going to dwarf the White House. That sounds problematic to me, that we're going to build this huge thing. I mean, it seems like a ballroom, it probably is a reasonable thing to build, but I don't know that we've had much public discussion of what it ought to look like. Maybe we shouldn't. I mean, it's, you know, the president has, as far as I know, the authority to do these things. But yeah, so it's the lie, and then followed by is he about to build like a gold ballroom that's 2 stories taller than the actual White House building. What this man does not have what I would call great taste. So I hope it looks okay.
Well, my take on it is less about the substance of tearing it down and more about the politics of it. And I think he botched the politics. He told people that he wasn't going to tear it down. He said that, you know, I mean, there was kind of a moving goalpost. At one point, they put out that when they first ripped into it, they said, "Oh, it's just going to be the portico at the front of it," and then all of a sudden, the whole thing was gone. They were never straight up about it. But I think the biggest thing is most people didn't know it was coming at all, and they woke up in the morning and they see images of machines ripping into what most people see as a national monument. And, I think most people do have a sense of what the White House looks like. I think that they do have a picture in their mind of what it is. And whether there was good reason to tear it down or not, Trump never came to the American people and said, "Look, this is why I'm doing this. This is what we need." He just ripped into it. And it was a show of arrogance because he believed he could do it. And I think most Americans, I think eventually they'll get over it. I think this is a short-lived story in the scheme of things. A couple more weeks, we're probably not going to be spending a whole lot of time talking about it, though, of course, we'll see progress on the Reconstruction. But he could have easily come out and said, we need a new ballroom. We need a place to have state dinners because right now we're setting up tents in the middle of bad weather, and I think most Americans would have agreed with that. And he could have given us plans and he could have said, this is what this new thing's going to look like. And he could have involved the people whose job it is to oversee the White House. So there's a national, I think it's for National Association for, or Preservation of Historic Trusts. I can't remember. It's some committee that basically oversees public buildings. There's the National Park Service has a role in it. There's an advisory committee for what to do with changes to the White House, and he just ignored all of them like he does with government in general. He ignores anything and just does it because Donald Trump knows he's never going to be held accountable by the one group of people who can hold him accountable, and that's members of Congress. That's the Republican members of Congress. He can get away with it. And he did it. And I think he botched it, though. He could have done it in a way that he didn't pay a political price, and right now he's paying a political price. And back to Anderson's point, I think Democrats need to make the point not that they're losing sight of health care, but that Donald Trump, at the same time people are going to go without paychecks, is going to go spend this type of money building basically a monument to himself. At the same time, we're seeing, what did you say? It's $38 trillion now deficit.
That's about right, yeah.
This guy living this lavish lifestyle while the rest of us aren't, while everybody's chastising us about living within our means, except for asking Donald Trump to live within his means. And that's a pretty good message for Democrats. And particularly as they say, Donald Trump wants you to pay more for your health care so he can build himself a ballroom. That's a good message. That's kind of my take on it. Let's transition now to a new kind of segment. What do you have something, Travis?
I was going to quote an old Widespread Panic song, "Beware of the man who builds monuments to himself."
Right, exactly. That's very good. Where in the world is Anderson Clayton? And more importantly, where has she been? Over the time that we've been doing Restless Natives podcast, Travis and I noticed that a lot of times Anderson shows up and she's in some other location. She's not at the Goodwin House in Raleigh. She's not at her home. She's out on the road. And we're curious, Anderson, where have you been this week? Or where have you been over the last 2 weeks? What have you seen? Who have you seen? And what are you hearing?
We've been a little bit of everywhere. So this last weekend, we actually got to go out. The NCDP got asked to come out to Oregon because Oregon Dems did an annual summit where I keynoted their summit dinner that they had out there. So I was in Bend, Oregon, near the more western side of the state versus what we would, I guess like the more middle side, more middle part of Oregon, and it's more the rural side to the state that I think that a lot of times gets overlooked. And so it was
You weren't
really
hanging with the frogs in Portland.
I was not, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, I was hanging out with some different frogs out there where we needed to be in that sense. But we came back, and unfortunately, because of the redistricting mess that Republicans have put us through this year, we've been in the center of the state this week quite a lot. We had a great rally in Raleigh on Tuesday, and so thank you to everybody who's listening to this right now that found themselves out at the old Capitol building with us, because I think that was one of the best things that we could do to put public pressure on Republicans and really help public opinion be shaped about what's going on right now, because Democrats knew when we went into that week that we were going to lose this congressional seat because the veto power does not rest with the governor around redistricting. And so for us, it was a challenging time because, as a lot of people know, Democrats broke the supermajority in the state house last November, and we had fully expected to be able to hold the governor's veto on any bad bills that came through the legislature this year. And for those of you listening to me that have followed NC politics very closely, I know we have yet to be able to do that too in some circumstances. But we were hopeful about it. And I also think that it was a depressing time to sort of be there and say, well, we know this is going to happen, but how do we still make sure that people across North Carolina know that we're going to put up a fight and that we're going to help people understand that there's been a long-term strategy in place for the party since 2023 to be able to take back the state Supreme Court and reverse what Republicans are doing right now, because their short-lived victories are going to be long-term goals for Democrats. And I genuinely believe that we are going to have pickup opportunities in the state, both in 26 and also in 28, that maybe they didn't anticipate from these bad maps that they're about to draw for themselves.
I hope you're right.
Look, a lot of my congressional candidates would say that too. They were hyped up after these maps. I had people that were running in some of my champion districts look at me and go, Anderson, what does that look like for us now?
Yeah.
I think they're geared up, but we know that is it's been extremely impactful, at least in eastern North Carolina too. So a lot of my county parties out there are really concerned right now about what's going to happen to their representation. So we were rallying in Raleigh this week, and then we were in the legislature the next 2 days after that, because the rally, apparently from what I got told, the Republicans in the legislature did not want to take a vote on Tuesday somehow, because they had like 1,000 people walking around the legislature asking to get in committee rooms and trying to talk to their folks. And so the best advocacy that I could have to you all listening to this is the more you can get to Raleigh and advocate to your Republican legislators, the more that they may not take some of those votes that we're looking at right now, because they are afraid of people at the end of the day and the power that they have.
You have any place interesting if you're going soon, or do you know where you're headed?
I'll be honest with you. I'd have to check a calendar to tell y'all where I'm going to be next week. I think I'm going to be in New York. So we're doing I've got a fundraiser in New York on Monday, and then I'll be back, and we're doing 2 county events on Wednesday and Thursday of next week. And then we'll be out and about. But we do a lot of national fundraising. So even in Oregon, I got to go meet with a couple of donors while I was out there too, trying to bring, my Republicans love when I say this, trying to bring blue state money to a red state. You know what I'm saying? A little bit of that.
Yeah. Well, I just want to go on the record right here and as saying Anderson Clayton is the best state party chair in the nation, and we are proud to have her as a Democratic Party chair. So, and
well, you know what, Thomas
she's
Mills, I ain't gonna lie
working
to you. The
What's
two
that?
opinions that I'd care the most about for that, to be truthful, are sitting right here on this call. So I'm grateful for that, to be truthful with you.
Well, it's impressive to watch you operate, Anderson. I will say that. Look, I've spent the last 40 years of my life watching Democratic Party chairs.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what, we got, if this is the one other shout out I can give, I've got a hell of a staff. Like, I have 25 people that work insane hours, that work is extremely hard, if not harder than I do at this. And I'm really, really grateful to each and every single one of them for the work that they're doing across the state, because that to me makes my job and my life a lot easier, is knowing that we've got good people that are from and that are working in the places that they care about.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Well, thanks so much for that. Well, let's move on. And Travis spent a lot of his life as a reporter. And so today we're going to hear the stories that Travis thinks need to be followed, and things that everybody should pay a little bit more attention to. So I'm going to turn it over here to Travis and find out what are you following today, Travis?
Yeah, I'm excited about this new little feature we got here. I'm going to go with the story about Dan Kane in the News and Observer and the Charlotte Observer this week, where Dan, for those who don't know, if you are doing something wrong you shouldn't be doing in politics, Dan Kane is literally the last person you want to call you because he's a bulldog. And he had a great story about a road project in Mooresville. And what happened was these developers were building a bunch of homes, pretty significant development, and they needed a connector road as part of this. And it's going to be a $15 million road. And they told the local government officials as they were getting the project approved, don't worry about it. Y'all won't have to pay for that. We'll handle that. So they left this impression that it wouldn't be taxpayer money, that they would build this road at a cost of about $15 million. What did they do instead, you ask? Hired lobbyists. They made campaign donations. And lo and behold, when I can't remember what budget year it is, but one of the recent ones, when the 786-page
2023.
there you go. When the 2023 budget, almost 800 pages came out, buried in there was $15 million for this road. So instead of these developers paying for it, they used their influence at the state legislature to get it done. And this is part of a series that Dan Kane and the News and Observer have done for a couple of years now called Power and Secrecy. I highly recommend everybody to Google Power and Secrecy News and Observer and just read this series. It really helps explain how political power can just be nakedly used to get things done in this state with taxpayer money. And then, opinions are going to vary as to whether or not it's appropriate, but it's an excellent series, the Power and Secrecy series. And then I always want to when I was a reporter, Dan Kane would break something big and I'd be like, dang it. Like he didn't really leave much meat on the bone for me to follow this up. So I always try to think about ways where other reporters can, because a story shouldn't just be a story once and then we all just forget about it. So, I would recommend talk to state lawmakers who are from these areas or who are from Mooresville. Like, hey, was this an appropriate use of money? Try to find out who actually put it in the budget. We do not have rules in this state at our legislature that require millions of dollars to have a name attached to them when it goes in the budget. It's just kind of like, oh, well, that was a House thing. Oh, I think that came from the Senate. That's really not the way that I think the railroad should be run. I'm a process guy, as people know. So, I would ask those sorts of questions. Keep asking questions about these things because important stories shouldn't just fade away.
I need to read that story. I have not read that, but it rings very true. What's that, Anderson?
See?
Yes.
My mouth dropped. And I get it, right? I shouldn't be surprised. Duke Energy gave the Republican building fund $100,000 this year, right, to help them deny election results. But I'm like, and to get energy rates raised in the state, right? So it shouldn't be surprising to me at all. But for some reason, $15 million is a lot more to me than $100,000. And I'm like, if I was everybody in Mooresville, I'd be calling everybody in Raleigh right now and be like, what the hell just happened to us? But to your point, Travis, that was also a 2023 budget. And I'm like, oh man, the one thing that I think I've got to get better job of as a party chair, to your point, Thomas, is going back through and digging out shit like that. Like if we had researchers full time that was investigating what Republicans were spending money on in the state legislature, I think people across North Carolina would just be pissed off every day.
Well, I'll tell you something. That story reminds me of, I think, a bigger story that's already gone by and was missed. But about 25 years ago, for some reason, they built a 4-lane highway that is as straight as a landing strip that runs from the Research Triangle Park to Pittsburgh. And for years, it was empty. I used to love that road. Because I spent a lot of my life in Pittsburgh. I could get on the road in Pittsburgh and get into Raleigh there was no stoplights. There are a few now, but there were no stoplights back then. And it was straight, right across Jordan Lake. It was gorgeous. And I couldn't figure out, why did you build this road? And all of a sudden, a group of developers announced that they had been accumulating 9,000 acres, that they were going to build 60,000 houses on the eastern edge of Pittsburgh. And it all of a sudden made total sense. These were the richest men in North Carolina. They had been buying this property up for over 25 years, roughly the same time they decided to build that highway. And now we've got this thing called Chatham Park, and they have a straight line that goes all the way from Pittsburgh, and they've even got a toll road that takes you straight into the Research Triangle Park. And you can't tell me that that was an accident. Nobody saw that and said, oh, let's just build that big road, because for many, many years, you'd drive that road in the middle of the day and there was nobody on it.
You
Now
know,
it's changed.
this is unrelated to that, but related to the topic of it because of something else that we've discussed on here, right? Sam Page was talking about Phil Berger recently. He's got a Twitter account, and I'm a Twitter girly, unfortunately, so I'm on that thing. And
Me
I
too.
was looking at replies of Phil Berger's and Sam Page's, and one of the folks that replied to Sam Page was talking to him about wanting to vote for him and was saying, Phil Berger has helped allocate away rural communities and land mass to big developers. And that was one of the reasons why he was so angry, because it was happening across the state, where you would have people that were coming in and pricing other folks out of their homes because developments were being built in areas that weren't being publicly known, right? Like you're saying, Thomas, it just all of a sudden sort of happened out of the blue. But I thought it was interesting because that's also sort of a tie to Phil Berger at the state Senate level, of at least his own constituents are saying, you're allowing for this type of development to happen in areas too that we're not being as forthcoming about. But it was talking about how many people are buying up land around North Carolina. And it makes sense. We're the third fastest growing state in the country, right? If you got an eye for development and you're looking at where are you going to go to next and sort of population trends, which is what a lot of people are looking at right now, right? When you're thinking about where to invest. I think it's really interesting how even the Republican side of things are starting to make that connection with folks that are in positions of power, but it's impacting them in the wrong ways because, a lot of our rural communities right now, Republican dominated, do not want big growth and development in their backyards.
That's right. Yeah, I was watching. There's a woman on Twitter who's very pro North Carolina, and her big thing is stop the growth, stop the people coming into the town, and it's like,
Girl, I know exactly who you're talking about too, and let me tell you what.
but
I don't
it's
know in
enough.
North Carolina. I've never seen somebody that uses the love of North Carolina against people that live here besides her. But here
Oh
we go.
man, it's something to watch. But let's not get into Twitter world. Woo! Last thing you and I need is to have a Twitter fight with that. But anyhow, well, so we're getting towards the end of things. The last segment, I'm going to go off on a rant. I rant. I go off on some rant almost every time. Let's just have a planned rant instead of one of my off the cuff rants. And so this time I'm going to talk to you. The rant I have has to do with what happened in North Carolina this week, or in the United States. In GOP news this week, North Carolina Republicans stole a congressional seat. They already had a 10-4 majority in the congressional delegation in the state, even though the state splits evenly between Democrats and Republicans, and now they're going to have an 11-4 split with no competitive congressional races. Donald Trump bulldozed the East Wing of the White House. He didn't give us any warnings. He didn't go to any oversight committees. And then yesterday or the day before, I heard that Steve Bannon went on a podcast and declared that Donald Trump will be elected to a third term in 2028. It hit me. Republicans aren't interested in what they can do. They're interested in what they can get away with. And apparently they can get away with a lot. They see constitutional constraints and the rule of law as little more than inconveniences, especially when it comes to wielding power. Donald Trump clearly believes that the government is his to do with as he pleases. The White House has numerous advisory and oversight boards that Trump could have consulted before ripping into that building, and that most people see as a national monument, but instead he treated it like his own. And we don't know what he'll do to other monuments. We don't know what he'll do to the rest of the White House, for that matter. And in the North Carolina legislature, Republicans have essentially ended democracy in congressional and legislative races. They've gerrymandered themselves overwhelming majorities in the state house and state senate just because they can. And as for Steve Bannon, he's empowered by the lack of accountability after January 6th. He believes he can rig the 2028 election to give Donald Trump a third term in direct violation of the Constitution. And he believes that in part because he knows that virtually every elected Republican in the United States will fall in line, and nobody will stand up as they do it. Here in North Carolina, we've already seen what they try to do. When we had a contested judicial race here, not only did the Republican Party try to rig the election, the state Supreme Court has shown a willingness to undo elections by changing the rules after the fact. They don't care about what is right or what is wrong. They only care about what they can get away with. And that's what scares me about 2026. I'm pretty optimistic that Democrats are going to have a good environment to run in. Republicans have overreached. Donald Trump his favorabilities are at an all-time low, and I don't think they're going to get a whole lot better. People don't like what they're doing in Washington, and they don't like necessarily what they're doing in North Carolina. But if Republicans can rig elections in such a way that Democrats can't win, like they've already done with congressional and legislative seats, then we're in a world of trouble. And it's up to us to figure out how to stop. And that's my rant for the week, because it's all about what they can get away with, not what they can do.
So if that's your concern, then Thomas, how do you convince people to still keep going with it? Folks that are not as in tune to you as knowing about elections and how they work, and also the history, right, of that. The country's been in a place like this before with other administrations, maybe not as deep in a hole as this administration has brought us, but I think that people that have fought in wars on behalf of this country would argue far differently, to be truthful with you. And so I'm wondering from your perspective, I hear you said optimism, but I also hear Democrats have got to figure out a way out of this. And I'm like, well, in North Carolina, I would tell you one. I would talk about a Supreme Court. I would say there's a 3-step plan to winning it. I would talk about that fight to take it back. But I think some people, when they talk like you do, it is, and not like you do, but just like what you said there, I don't believe that we're going to have free and fair elections in 26. So the next thought process in my mind is that people go to, so what's the point in voting? So what's the point in doing X, Y, or Z? What's your thought to that too, to go on top of that rant, maybe?
Well, I think that everybody needs to get out and vote. And I don't think you give up the fight. I mean, what we have to hope is that the federal courts stand up. That's what protected us. We have limited guardrails when we have a Supreme Court that's willing to basically change the rules of elections after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
We did have, the reason that didn't go any further in the court system is because the ruling that Republican judge wrote was so damning that I don't think anybody wanted to contest it. I mean, he laid out how crooked that was.
He also made us do that twice, though, before he made a ruling like that.
He did.
I mean, Judge Myers didn't do that automatically. It took a lot, right, of public pressure, of people showing up. We packed the gallery for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals hearing in January for the Democratic Party up there. And do you know, when we walked in that room, those judges up there on that panel looked at us and they said, well, my God, is there something going on here today that's important? I don't know why this many people would be in a judicial chamber. And I remember being outside of the Court of Appeals doors where the sign on there says, to go into the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, right? It says, or Fourth Circuit Court, it says, your rights end where this door begins. And I'm like, yes, that is what we're walking into today in North Carolina to go fight for an election that we already won. And to me, I don't know that federal courts are going to be the place that uphold everything for us in the future. And I think I need people to get realistic a little bit about, we're going to be uncomfortable. Americans and people that are afraid right now, people that are angry right now, And it takes a lot for people to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that we need to realize a little bit more of the situation that we're in, and that we're going to be going through a lot more uncomfortable times to get to a place where we can all be comfortable again. I think that there is a lot missing from some of that reality, that people are saying 26 will be the end of our elections, or Donald Trump will be the third term president in 2028. And there's got to be some pushback to that, but also some fight to that end. And I'm not saying that you're not saying that. I think right now I'm hearing a lot of lacking of that people are like, oh, it's over. And I'm like, well, who told y'all just to give up the shovel? Like, I don't know. And it's kind of frustrating to me as a party chair in some ways to be, and I said it the other day at that rally of like, everybody's angry right now about Project 2025. And I'm like, great, y'all are waking up to what the South has been going through then. I'm happy to have the nation in the fight, But it doesn't mean that we're not going to survive through this. It just means that it's going to be really, really uncomfortable for a lot of people who have been comfortable their entire lives and have never had to feel that way. And I think that it's forcing us into that in some aspects.
Well, the one way I do think that Democrats can beat these attempts at undermining democracy is to win elections by large margins. I mean, when Republicans steal elections, it's when they're won by very narrow. Had Allison Riggs had a 4-point advantage over Jefferson Griffin, nobody would have been contesting that election. The fact that it was a few hundred votes is what they were trying to capitalize on. And so we need to make sure that our people are showing up and making sure that our people are voting, because in particular, I'm concerned about Roy Cooper, and Justice Earls too, but both of them are statewide races that we may have lost these districts to a large degree, at least for the time being, but these statewide races are still ours to win. And we just need to win them by a large enough margin that they can't come back and try to undo the outcome of the election. And that's,
I think that's true. And for anybody listening to this right now, you just heard Thomas. And let me tell you a fun fact. 200,000 more Democrats came out and voted last year for Kamala Harris and Josh Stein at the top of the ticket than they did Justice Allison Riggs. We could have prevented that 734 vote margin from being challenged in court had we had more Democrats that had the education, the voter education about judicial elections. So if you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell can I do right now then, Anderson? You go out and you talk to 5 people today, tomorrow, the next day of your life that you have not spoken to about politics in your life, and you ask them if they're registered to vote in North Carolina and if they know about a Supreme Court election in 2026 that could determine the future of fair elections in North Carolina after they just witnessed what happened this last week. Each and every single one of us right now can be doing a small action every day to make a difference in a big election that will make the impact of our lives in 2026, in my opinion. And that's what I want y'all to leave here with.
I think we should leave on that. I think Anderson just gave us marching orders.
Amen.
I want to thank Travis and Anderson for being here today. I hope that we'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm Thomas Mills. I'm signing off for Politics NC.